mellow but be a little mysterious in your voice?
I can't alter my voice since I can't produce audio, but I can suggest a way to read it with a more mysterious tone if you're recording it yourself. Hi. Welcome to Macabre Mysteries. My name is Kelly, and I'll be your host alongside a very special AI companion. Together, we're diving into the weirdest, most enigmatic mysteries the world has to offer. From eerie, unsolved crimes to unexplained phenomena, we'll explore the stories that make you wonder and wander through the shadows of the unknown.
In the shadowed corners of literary history where quills scratch tales of despair and ravens perched upon whispered secrets, one man's words continue to haunt us. Edgar Allan Poe, the architect of the macabre, the pioneer of mystery, and the poet of the human soul's darkest recesses. But in a world where artificial intelligence now probes the very fabric of human creativity, could Poe's stories hold more than just the echoes of his time? Could his imagination, his despair, contain insights that transcend centuries? Today on Macabre Mysteries, we venture into a realm where the Gothic past meets the digital future, and AI unburdened by time sifts through Poe's life and works, piecing together a puzzle of genius, grief, and shadows. What will it uncover, and what questions will it leave unanswered? Step into the labyrinth where we unravel the mysteries of a literary legend. Edgar Poe left New York in early 1831 and sought refuge with Mrs. Clem on Mechanics Row in Baltimore. His grandmother, his brother William Henry, and his 8-year-old future wife Virginia were part of the household, which also included Henry Clem. Although they were not in a position to support him, they managed to survive together. Poe tried to find work, writing to editor William Gwynne on May 6, 1831, expressing his desire to settle in Baltimore, as he no longer viewed Richmond as home. Unfortunately, his request for a position and another application for a teaching job did not lead to any opportunities. Poe may have been attracted to Baltimore due to its vibrant activities and intellectual environment. Incorporated as a city on December 31, 1796, Baltimore became the third largest city in the U.S. by 1827. 2 lines of steamboats operated in the city, and the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, the first in the nation, began service in 1830. This expansion contributed to Baltimore's role as a hub for trade and political activity in the 1830s. After Poe's arrival, his friend William Wirt was nominated for president on the anti-Masonic ticket but won only Vermont in the 1832 election. Notably, both Andrew Jackson and Henry Clay were also nominated in Baltimore that year, reflecting the city's central role in political conventions. Additionally, between 1815 and 1833, 72 new periodicals were launched in Baltimore, indicating a strong intellectual interest. 2 new theaters, the New Theater in 1829 and the Baltimore Museum in 1830, were also established, although it's uncertain how much Poe engaged with these cultural offerings. He escaped the cholera plague which raged in Baltimore in 1831, and it is possible that some of the details of the plague in his stories of King Pest or The Mask of the Red Death may be derived from Poe's observation in Baltimore, even though he lays the scene in London, or in No Man's Land. King Pest occurs in October, and the height of the cholera epidemic came in September. Even more probable as a local source, this time for his story, Arrows and Charmian, was the rain of meteors visible in Baltimore in the early morning of November 13, 1833. The intense light which gave the sky the appearance of sunrise, the dread on the part of some of the beholders that the end of the world was at hand, the calmness of others, might easily have suggested to Poe the description by arrows of the comet which brings destruction to the world. There are no verbal similarities between the contemporary accounts and Poe's story. As usual, the essential part of the story, the growing sense of awe and terror, the intensification of all life, human and animal, are of Poe's creation. It is probable, also, that the aspect of ill in the heavens and the terror of the skies in shadow may come from Poe's observation of Baltimore's reaction to celestial wonders. One liability the household soon lost. Henry Poe, who had been in poor health, probably brought on by too much liquor, died on August 1st, 1831, at the age of 24, and was buried on August 2nd in the churchyard belonging to the First Presbyterian Church. The funeral took place from Mrs. Clem's home in Wilkes Street in the older part of the city, between Exeter and High Streets, not far from the spot where Edgar Poe was to be found in a dying condition in 1849. The Baltimore American and Commercial Daily Advertiser for August 2nd contained the notice: "Died last evening W. H. Poe, aged 24 years. His friends and acquaintances are invited to attend his funeral this morning at 9, from the dwelling of Mrs. Clem, in Wilkes Street." That he was not very well known may be judged from the fact that the Baltimore Gazette announced his death as that of W. H. Pope and made no correction in subsequent issues. On October 16, 1831, Poe wrote to John Allen a letter singularly different in tone from his earlier or later appeals.
Baltimore, Octo. 16th, 1831. Dear Sir, it is a long time since I have written to you unless with an application for money or assistance. I am sorry that it is so seldom that I hear from you or even of you, for all communication seems to be at an end, and when I think of the long 21 years that I have called you father and you have called me son, I could cry like a child to think that it should all end in this. You know me too well to think me interested. If so, why have I rejected your 1,000 offers of love and kindness? It is true that when I have been in great extremity, I have always applied to you, for I had no other friend, but it is only at such a time as the present when I can write to you with the consciousness of making no application for assistance that I dare to open my heart or speak one word of old affection. When I look back upon the past and think of everything, of how much you tried to do for me, of your forbearance and your generosity, in spite of the most flagrant ingratitude on my part, I cannot help thinking myself the greatest fool in existence. I am ready to curse the day when I was born. But I am fully, truly conscious that all these better feelings have come too late. I have nothing more to say, and this time no favor to ask. Although I am wretchedly poor, I have managed to get clear of the difficulty I spoke of in my last, and am out of debt at any rate. May God bless you. E.A.P. Will you not write one word to me?
This letter suggests that Poe and Allen shared a deep bond at one point, indicating a genuine care for one another. It also offers strong evidence against the idea that Allen was giving Poe a regular allowance or that Poe had a conflict with his foster father or Mrs. Allen during his visit to Richmond in the summer of 1831. Had any such disagreement occurred, it's likely that Poe's feelings toward Allen would have changed, and he might not have sought Allen's support during times of trouble. Notably, on November 18, 1831, Poe reached out to Allen, which underscores the connection they maintained despite any past issues.
Balt. November 18th, 1831. My dear Pa, I am in the greatest distress and have no other friend on earth to apply to except yourself. If you refuse to help me, I know not what I shall do. I was arrested 11 days ago for a debt which I never expected to have to pay, and which was incurred as much on Hyes Henry's account as on my own about 2 years ago. I would rather have done anything on earth than apply to you again after your late kindness, but indeed I have no other resource, and I am in bad health, and unable to undergo as much hardships as formerly, or I never would have asked you to give me another cent. If you will only send me this one-time $80 by Wednesday next, I will never forget your kindness and generosity. If you refuse, God only knows what I shall do, and all my hopes and prospects are ruined forever. Yours affectionately, E. A. Poe. I have made every exertion, but in vain.
The debt in question was $80, and it appears unlikely that Poe was actually arrested, as it has been established that he was not incarcerated. To clarify this matter, historical authorities from Baltimore, Mr. Lewis H. Dealman and Dr. J. Hall Pleasance, conducted a thorough examination of the jail records. Mr. Dealman shared the results of their investigation, stating, "Dr. J. Hall Pleasance and I reviewed the official docket for a 6-month period, extending 3 months before and after the alleged date of Poe's arrest. We found no evidence of his detention, considering the possibility that Poe might have been sentenced under an assumed name. We meticulously examined the charges against other prisoners and the amounts of debt for which they were held. Unfortunately, we did not identify any relevant amount or misdemeanor that would align with Poe's situation. It is clear that Poe had legitimate reasons to be concerned about potential arrest, especially given that in 1832, over half of the inmates in the Baltimore jail were insolvent debtors. After receiving no response from Allen, Mrs. Clem took the initiative to reach out again on December 5th, and Poe made another appeal on December 15th. This context sheds light on the pressures he faced during that time.
Vault, December 15th, 1831. Dear Poe, I am sure you cannot refuse to assist me if you were well aware of the distress I am in. How often have you relieved the distress of a perfect stranger in circumstances less urgent than mine? And yet when I beg and entreat you in the name of God to send me succor, you will still refuse to aid me. I know that I have offended you past all forgiveness, and I know that I have no longer any hopes of being again received into your favor. But for the sake of Christ, do not let me perish for a sum of money which you would never miss, and which would relieve me from the greatest earthly misery. The remainder of the letter is the most abject plea to forget past offenses. Yours affectionately.
The endorsement by John Allen is of especial interest. Wrote on the December 7, 1831 to John Walsh to procure his liberation and to give him $20 besides to keep him out of further difficulties and value for such amount as might be required, and stating he neglected sending it on till the January 12, 1832.
I know that I have no claim upon your generosity, and that what little share I had of your affection is long since forfeited, but for the sake of what once was dear to you, for the sake of the love you bore me when I sat upon your knee and called you Father, do not forsake me this only time, and God will remember you accordingly. Edgar A. Poe.
It is possible that this appeal encouraged Allen to find the letter he had forgotten to mail, and we like to think there's merit to that idea. The year 1831 stands out as a pivotal moment, not only for the release of Poe's new volume of poems, which showcased a significant improvement over his earlier works, but also for the emergence of his first short stories. Despite facing various challenges, Poe committed himself to honing his craft in the literary field, where he would later gain international acclaim. On June 4, 1831, the Philadelphia Saturday Courier announced an exciting prize contest offering $100 for the best short story, and it provided additional rules in the following issues. Stories were required to be submitted by December 1, 1831. The contest concluded with Delia S. Bacon receiving the prize for her tale, Love's Martyr, as announced in the weekly issue on December 31st. The judging panel, consisting of notable figures such as playwrights David Paul Brown and Richard Penn Smith, along with William M. Meredith, Morton McMichael, John Musgrave, and Charles Alexander, appeared to favor sentimental stories over the 5 entries Poe submitted. Nonetheless, the editors of the Courier recognized the quality of his work and chose to publish all of his submissions. Metzengerstein was featured on January 14, 1832, The Duc de l'Omelette on March 3, A Tale of Jerusalem on June 9, A Decided Loss on November 10, and The Bargain Lost on December 1. This allowed Poe's early stories to reach a broader audience and laid the groundwork for his future success. In 1832, Edgar Allan Poe's methods of financial support remain unclear, as the available records and testimonies are often unreliable and contradictory. Despite these uncertainties, it is known that he continued to reside with Mrs. Clem on Wilkes Street during this period. A gap exists in his correspondence with John Allen, starting from December 1831 and resuming in April 1833, which adds to the mystery of his activities during this time. One definitive piece of evidence regarding Poe's life in 1832 comes from an editorial in the Baltimore Saturday Visitor, dated August 4, 1832. This editorial, likely written by Lambert A. Wilmer, a friend of Poe and the literary editor of the Visitor, praises Poe's manuscript tales for their originality, rich imagery, and pure style, noting that they stand out even among American literature. This critical acclaim suggests that Poe was actively engaged in writing short stories during this period and was residing in Baltimore that summer. Furthermore, there are rumors that Poe might have visited Richmond, his former home, in 1831 or 1832. However, the evidence, particularly from the Valentine letters, suggests that such a visit in 1831 is highly unlikely. The possibility of a visit in 1832 cannot be completely ruled out, although there is no concrete proof to support it. This is further complicated by T.H. Ellis's claim that Mrs. Allen's first encounter with Poe did not occur until March 1834. Additionally, Poe's own letter from April 12, 1833, which expresses profound distress, seems to contradict any recent visits or positive interactions during that time. This discussion highlights the challenges and gaps in documenting Edgar Allan Poe's personal life and early career, with only sporadic pieces of evidence providing a glimpse into his activities and state of mind during these years.
Baltimore, April 12, 1833. It has now been more than 2 years since you have assisted me, and more than 3 since you have spoken to me. I feel little hope that you will pay any regard to this letter, but still I cannot refrain from making one more attempt to interest you in my behalf. If you will only consider in what a situation I am placed, you will surely pity me. Without friends, without any means, consequently of obtaining employment, I am perishing, absolutely perishing for want of aid. And yet I am not idle, nor addicted to any vice, nor have I committed any offense against society which would render me deserving of so hard a fate. For God's sake, pity me, and save me from destruction. Edgar A. Poe.
The credibility of the anecdotes about Edgar Allan Poe's personal life during his time in Baltimore, especially those involving his love affairs, is highly debatable. One particular story revolves around his alleged courtship of Mary Devereux. This tale, which is based on a magazine article claiming to recount the reminiscences of a 71-year-old woman, suggests Poe was fervently in love with her, attempted to force his way into her room, and even assaulted her uncle who opposed their relationship. However, the lack of named sources and the sensational nature of these claims call their validity into question. The account is riddled with implausible details and dramatic embellishments, which are typical of retrospective romantic stories. For example, the woman's claim that Poe visited her every evening for a year and statements about Mr. Allen's second wife seem exaggerated. Such narratives, while they might capture the imagination, often do not withstand scrutiny against known facts of Poe's life or the broader context of his character and behaviors. In historical biography, the selection of evidence must be rigorous, particularly when it shapes our understanding of a figure's life. If a story significantly deviates from established facts or portrays the subject in a manner inconsistent with well-documented behaviors, it should be viewed with skepticism. The burden of proof rests heavily on such accounts. Moreover, this particular portrayal of Poe as a lawless atheist uniquely claimed by Mary contrasts sharply with other contemporary descriptions, undermining its credibility. While it is possible that Poe and Mary had some form of acquaintance and perhaps flirtation, the extreme actions attributed to him in the story are unlikely and should be treated with caution, if not outright dismissed. Moving beyond the tales associated with Poe's Mary, which do little to illuminate the true nature of Poe's life, we see that Poe did maintain some social interactions. He was known to visit his cousin, Elizabeth Herring, the daughter of his Aunt Eliza, who had corresponded with John Allan during Poe's childhood. Elizabeth had a fondness for Poe, and it was during this period in Baltimore that he wrote poems to her, including Elizabeth, which began as a sonnet but expanded to 16 lines to incorporate each initial of her full name, Elizabeth Rebecca. This poem, however, was never published. Both Elizabeth and Mary eventually married others. It seems unlikely that Poe had made a significant impact on Baltimore's literary circles before his win at the Visitor Contest in 1833. Notably, John P. Kennedy, who was unaware of Poe before the contest, awarded him the prize. Poe did, however, have meaningful connections with figures like Lambert Wilmer and John H. Hewitt, who were both involved in the newspaper industry. Wilmer, who often took long walks with Poe discussing various topics, later provided insights into Poe's character during this time. He refuted the prevalent stories about Poe's drinking habits and noted Poe's sobriety during this period, testimony that holds weight especially considering Wilmer's later comments on Poe's intemperance in Philadelphia. Wilmer's observations on Poe's work ethic were particularly striking. He described Poe as one of the most hardworking men in the world, always engaged in some activity regardless of the time of day. Wilmer also commented on Poe's appearance, noting his consistently neat and often elegant attire, which he found remarkable given Poe's limited financial means. This description adds a layer of complexity to our understanding of Poe, highlighting his personal dignity and dedication amidst challenging circumstances. While Lambert Wilmer's detailed accounts may sometimes veer into the realm of embellishment, his description of Edgar Allan Poe's relationship with Virginia appears grounded in some reality. He provides several examples of Poe's sensitive and affectionate nature, notably in his efforts to support his aunt and cousin before marrying the latter. As the editor of the Southern Literary Messenger, Poe allocated a substantial portion of his salary to fund Virginia's education, ensuring she received instruction in various refined arts at his expense. There were times when his financial circumstances required him to take on the role of her tutor, notably in subjects like algebra, which he taught her himself. Wilmer challenges the more critical views of Poe's relationship with Virginia, asserting that Poe demonstrated his love appropriately by striving to ensure her happiness and comfort. He mentions that Poe, despite limited means, maintained a piano to cater to Virginia's musical interests, a luxury that stretched his financial capabilities. Wilmer also emphasizes the harmony in their relationship, noting that he never witnessed any harsh exchanges between them and strongly believed in Virginia's genuine affection for Poe, considering her too sincere to feign such emotions. Additionally, Wilmer's time in Baltimore from January to October 1832 provides valuable context for confirming Poe's activities and location during that year. While Wilmer's claim that Virginia was instructed in every elegant accomplishment might be an overstatement, the specific mention of algebra lessons is a tangible detail that supports the narrative of her intellectual development during this time. Poe's own letter to Allen in April 1833, supported by Wilmer's testimony, is worth a dozen feminine reminiscences in giving us an insight into his thoughts and feelings at this time. Far from being the philandering young poet, wasting his time in harrowing up the emotions of young women, he was a hard-working writer of fiction, probably also of unidentified work for newspapers. He was living quietly with Mrs. Clem, depending on her sympathy. Beyond a few friends, he was cut off by his poverty, and felt far from any wide acquaintance with social life or literary coteries in Baltimore. He was desperately unhappy, which his letter shows, and that he resented his fate is equally clear. It is the appeal of a normal young man who wishes to work and can find no one to employ him. However, he was not sitting idle in despair. In the Visitor for April 20, 1833, appeared a poem serenade by Edgar A. Poe. Although Poe did not reprint this poem in his collected edition of 1845, it has considerable merit. Perhaps he recognized that it was reminiscent of other poems of his early period dealing with the relations of sleep and dreams. It was addressed to Adeline. A measure of good fortune was in store for Poe. He was industriously writing short stories and endeavoring to have them published. One of his letters has special interest. In its description of his projected volume, it was sent with the manuscript of Epimanes to the editors of the New England magazine. This passage provides a deeper understanding of Edgar Allan Poe's life and struggles during his time in Baltimore. Here's a constructive summary. In April 1833, Poe wrote a letter to John Allan, expressing his desperation and unhappiness due to his financial struggles and lack of employment. Despite these challenges, Poe was a dedicated and hardworking writer. Focusing on fiction and possibly doing hack work for newspapers, he lived quietly with Mrs. Clem. Relying on the support of a few friends, his friend Lambert Wilmer's testimony supports Poe's industrious nature and respectable habits. During this period, Poe continued to write and publish his work. His poem Serenade appeared in the Visitor on April 20, 1833. He also sent a letter to the editors of the New England magazine, offering his collection of stories titled 11 Tales of the Arabesque. Although the magazines initially declined to publish his stories, Poe's persistence paid off when the Baltimore Saturday Visitor printed his work on June 15, 1833. Poe's resilience and dedication to his craft, despite his financial hardships and emotional struggles, highlight his commitment to his writing and his determination to succeed. In May 1833, Poe sent a letter to the editors of the New England magazine, offering his collection of stories titled 11 Tales of the Arabesque. He described the stories as being read by members of a literary club, followed by burlesque remarks on criticism. Despite his financial struggles, Poe continued to write and submit his work for publication. Poe's persistence paid off when he submitted his poem, The Colosseum, and 6 stories under the general title of Tales of the Folio Club to the Baltimore Saturday Visitor's literary contest. The judges, including John P. Kennedy, John H. B. Latrobe, and Dr. James H. Miller, awarded the prize for the best tale to Poe's manuscript found in a bottle. The judges praised Poe's stories for their originality, imagination, and rich style, and encouraged him to publish the entire collection. The most important outcome of the literary contest for Poe was his friendship with John Pendleton Kennedy, a respected lawyer and author in Baltimore. Kennedy provided Poe with material help, sympathy, and understanding, which were crucial for Poe's development as a writer. Kennedy's support helped Poe publish The Visionary, later The Assignation, in Godey's Lady's Book in January 1834. Kennedy also encouraged Poe to submit his Tales of the Folio Club to Carrie and Leah, although they ultimately declined to publish the volume. After writing his last despairing letter to John Allen, Poe moved with Mrs. Clem to a modest two-story dwelling at No. 3 Amity. With limited accommodations, Poe continued to work diligently on his writing. The neighborhood where Poe lived has since been the site of a slum clearance project by the Works Progress Administration, with placards announcing Edgar Allan Poe homes to prospective settlers. She, Mrs. Louisa Allen, never saw Edgar Poe but twice in her life. The account I have heard of her first meeting him was this. A short time previous to Mr. Allen's death, on the 27th of March 1834, he was greatly distressed by dropsy, was unable to lie down, and sat in an armchair night and day, several times a day, by the advice of his physician. He walked across the room for exercise, leaning on his cane, and assisted by his wife and a manservant during this illness of her husband. Mrs. Allen was on an occasion passing through the hall of this house, when hearing the front door bell ring, she opened the door herself. A man of remarkable appearance stood there, and without giving his name, asked if he could see Mr. Allen. She replied that Mr. Allen's condition was such that his physicians had prohibited any person from seeing him except his nurses. The man was Edgar A. Poe, who was, of course, perfectly familiar with the house. Thrusting her aside, and without noticing her reply, he passed rapidly upstairs to Mr. Allen's chamber, followed by Mrs. Allen. As soon as he entered the chamber, Mr. Allen raised his cane, and threatening to strike him if he came within his reach, ordered him out, upon which Poe withdrew, and that was the last time they ever met. The details of another incident involving Edgar Allan Poe, as recalled by a witness, are somewhat vague, but it appears to have occurred after Mr. Allen's death. According to the recollection, the witness was seated at a front window of her room when she noticed Poe entering the gate and approaching the door. She promptly sent her chambermaid to inform him that she was unable to meet with him at that time. The testimony of Thomas Ellis regarding Poe is particularly challenging to assess. Ellis is generally reliable when he recounts events he directly experienced and when he speaks without bias. However, the lengthy letter mentioned earlier was written with the explicit purpose of defending Mrs. Louisa Allen, aiming to perform an act of justice to one of the most admirable ladies I have ever known. It's important to note that Ellis's account of the aforementioned incident was based on hearsay. He also references another visit by Poe, the details of which remain unclear following these accounts. Ellis cites a letter from Mrs. Allen, which he had requested, further complicating the evaluation of his testimony due to its second-hand nature and his protective stance towards Mrs. Allen.
As regards Edgar Poe, of my own knowledge I know nothing. I only saw him twice, but all I heard of him from those who had lived with him was a tissue of ingratitude, fraud, and deceit. Mr. Poe had not lived under Mr. Allen's roof for 2 years before my marriage, and no one knew his whereabouts. His letters, which were very scarce, were dated from St. Petersburg, Russia. Although he had enlisted in the army at Boston after he became tired of army life, he wrote to his benefactor, expressing a desire to have a substitute if the money could be sent to him. Mr. Allen sent it, Poe spent it, and after the substitute was tired out, waiting and getting letters and excuses, he, the substitute, enclosed one of Poe's letters to Mr. Allen, which was too black to be credited if it had not contained the author's signature. Mr. Allen sent the money to the man, and banished Poe from his affections, and he never lived here again. I must say in justice, I never influenced Mr. Allen against him in the slightest degree. Indeed, I would not have presumed to have interfered or advised concerning him. Poe was never spoken of between us.
Many unfavorable rumors about Edgar Allan Poe originate from the Ellis Allen tradition. It is important to note the distinctly biased tone in Mrs. Allen's statements, along with the contradictory and second-hand nature of her evidence. Poe had left the army 18 months before her marriage to Allen, raising questions about her source of information regarding Poe's relationship with John Allen. If Poe was never spoken of between Mrs. Allen and John Allen, her knowledge of any estrangement seems unlikely. If Mrs. Allen's account is accurate, it implies there was no interaction between her and Poe in 1832. Should there have been such a meeting, it would contradict Ellis's later claims, indicating that Mrs. Allen would indeed have known Poe by 1834. Nonetheless, the purported visit in 1832, which has sparked much romanticized storytelling, is based on shaky grounds. On the factual side, Thomas Ellis confirms that John Allen died on March 27, 1834. His will, initially drafted on April 17, 1832, with its peculiar subsequent codicils dated December 31, 1832, and March 15, 1833, certainly caused a stir in Richmond. Although he made provisions for his recognized and suspected illegitimate children, he omitted any mention of his foster son Poe. Without Poe's connection, John Allen might have been largely forgotten, yet Mrs. Allen quickly disavowed his will. Our knowledge of Poe's personal life in 1834 is nearly as limited as it was in 1832. On March 15, 1835, Poe reached out to Kennedy for assistance in securing a teaching position, which he ultimately did not obtain. Kennedy's response was an immediate invitation to dinner, which led to a revealing letter from Poe that highlighted the dire circumstances he was experiencing.
Dr. Sir, your kind invitation to dinner today has wounded me to the quick. I cannot come, and for reasons of the most humiliating nature in my personal appearance, you may conceive my deep mortification in making this disclosure to you. But it was necessary. If you will be my friend so far as to loan me $20, I will call on you tomorrow. Otherwise it will be impossible, and I must submit to my fate. Sincerely yours, Edgar A. Poe.
Kennedy's proactive steps to assist Poe are evidenced by a journal entry he made after Poe's death in 1849. I encountered him in Baltimore around 1833 or 34, in dire straits. I provided him with clothing, meals, and the use of a horse for exercise. This support helped him recover from near despair. Subsequently, I secured a position for him with Mr. White at the Southern Literary Messenger in Richmond. His contributions greatly enhanced the periodical's appeal. However, Poe's irregular behavior and temperamental nature led him to resign, pursuing similar roles in Philadelphia and New York. Despite the challenges he faced, Poe often expressed gratitude for my assistance, as reflected in his numerous letters to me. His passing marks the loss of a brilliant, though erratic, talent. While Kennedy incorrectly recalls the exact year, his recollection of facilitating Poe's literary contributions is accurate. He helped publish several of Poe's stories in the Southern Literary Messenger, with titles such as Berenice in March 1835, Morella in April, Leonizing in May, and Hans Fall, A Tale in June. The Messenger was launched by Thomas Willis White in Richmond in August 1834, aimed at elevating Southern literature and encouraging local support for regional publications. James E. Heath initially served as its unpaid editor until April 1835. Succeeded briefly by Edward V. Sparhawk. Correspondence between Poe and White during this period confirms Poe's critical articles and story contributions, highlighting his appreciation even for modest payments of $5 and $4.94 sent through Kennedy. Despite health issues in May, which affected his review of Kennedy's novel, Poe maintained professional integrity, as seen in his refusal to accept payment for facilitating publication notices in local newspapers. Poe's correspondence from this time not only reflects his journalistic savvy, but also suggests he may have been contributing anonymously to newspaper columns, laying the groundwork for his later involvement with the Messenger. His letter from June 22 demonstrates his deep understanding of journalism.
Balt, June 22, D. 1835. My dear sir, I received your letter of the 18th yesterday, and this morning your reprint of the Messenger number 3. While I entirely agree with you, and with many of your correspondents, in your opinion of this number, it being in fact one of the very best issued, I cannot help entertaining a doubt whether it would be of any advantage to you to have the public attention called to this its second appearance by any detailed notice in the papers. There would be an air of irregularity about it, as the first edition was issued so long ago, which might even have a prejudicial effect. For indeed the various trifles, the mere semblance of anything unusual or outre, will frequently have a pernicious influence in cases similar to this, and you must be aware that of all the delicate things in the world, the character of a young periodical is the most easily injured. Besides, it is undeniable that the public will not think of judging you by the appearance or the merit of your magazine in November. Its present character, whether that be good or bad, is all that will influence them. I would therefore look zealously to the future, letting the past take care of itself. Adopting this view of the case, I thought it best to delay doing anything until I should hear further from you, being fully assured that a little reflection will enable you to see the matter in the same light as myself. One important objection to what you proposed is the insuperable dislike entertained by the daily editors to notice any but the most recent publications. And although I dare say that I could, if you insist upon it, Overcome this aversion in the present case, still it would be trifling to no purpose with your interest in that quarter. If, however, you disagree with me in these opinions, I will undoubtedly, upon hearing from you, do as you desire. Of course, the remarks I now make will equally apply to any other of the back numbers. You ask me if I will be willing to come on to Richmond if you should have occasion for my services during the coming winter. I reply that nothing would give me greater pleasure. I have been desirous, for some time past, of paying a visit to Richmond, and will be glad of any reasonable excuse for so doing. Indeed, I am anxious to settle myself in that city, and if by any chance you hear of a situation likely to suit me, I would gladly accept it, were the salary even the merest trifle. I should indeed feel myself greatly indebted to you, if through your means I could accomplish this object. What you say in the conclusion of your letter, in relation to the supervision of proof sheets, gives me reason to hope that possibly you might find something for me to do in your office. If so, I should be very glad, for at present a very small portion of my time is employed.
Critics often categorize Edgar Allan Poe as being disconnected from the literary mainstream of his era. However, evidence from Poe's own writings challenges this view. In a letter to White dated April 30th, 1835, Poe detailed the types of stories that were popular with contemporary periodical. This correspondence not only sheds light on the literary tastes of the time, but also offers insight into the inspirations behind his own works, providing valuable information for today's scholars studying him.
A word or two in relation to Berenice. Your opinion of it is very just. The subject is by far too horrible, and I confess that I hesitated in sending it you especially as a specimen of my capability. The tale originated in a bet that I could produce nothing effective on a subject so singular, provided I treated it seriously, but what I wish to say relates to the character of your magazine more than to any articles I may offer, and I beg you to believe that I have no intention of giving you advice, being fully confident that, upon consideration, you will agree with me. The history of all magazines shows plainly that those which have attained celebrity were indebted for it to articles similar in nature to Berenice, although, I grant you, far superior in style and execution. I say, similar in nature. You ask me, in what does this nature consist? In the ludicrous heightened into the grotesque, the fearful colored into the horrible, the witty exaggerated into the burlesque, the singular wrought out into the strange and mystical. You may say, all this is bad taste. I have my doubts about it. Nobody is more aware than I am that simplicity is the can of the day. But take my word for it, no one cares anything about simplicity in their hearts. Believe me also, in spite of what people say to the contrary, that there is nothing easier in the world than to be extremely simple. But whether the articles of which I speak are or are not in bad taste is little to the purpose. To be appreciated you must be read, and these things are invariably sought after with avidity. They are, if you will take notice, the articles which find their way into other periodicals and into the papers, and in this manner, taking hold upon the public mind, they augment the reputation of the source where they originated. Such articles are them as found in a madhouse and the monos and daimonos of the London New Monthly, the Confessions of an Opium Eater, and the Man in the Bell of Blackwood. The two first were written by no less a man than Buller. The Confessions were universally attributed to Coleridge, although unjustly. Thus the first men in Europe have not thought writings of this nature unworthy of their talents, and I have good reason to believe that some very high names valued themselves principally upon this species of literature. To be sure, originality is an essential in these things. Great attention must be paid to style, and much labor spent in their composition, or they will degenerate into the turgid or the absurd. If I am not mistaken, you will find Mr. Kennedy, whose writings you admire, and whose Swallow Barn is unrivaled for purity of style and thought. Of my opinion in this matter, it is unnecessary for you to pay much attention to the many who will no doubt favor you with their critiques. In respect to Berenice individually, I allow that it approaches the very verge of bad taste, but I will not sin quite so egregiously again. I propose to furnish you every month with a tale of the nature which I have alluded to. The effect, if any, will be estimated better by the circulation of the magazine than by any comments upon its contents. This much, however, is necessary to premise, that no two of these tales will have the slightest resemblance one to the other either in matter or manner, still however preserving the character which I speak of.
Poe did not limit himself to the then popular forms of short stories, but rather actively studied magazine trends, tailoring his writings to align with editorial preferences rather than writing solely for personal expression. By the summer of 1835, when Poe joined the staff of the Messenger in Richmond, he had already published 11 stories and written at least 16. These early stories, often referred to as the Tales of the Folio Club, were never published as a collection, and the list of stories varied over time. In 1833, Poe submitted these to the New England magazine, referring to them as 11 Tales of the Arabesque. His vision for the Folio Club involved a fictional group of 11 dunderheads who critiqued each other's stories in a burlesque style reflective of contemporary literary forms. A significant aspect of Poe's early stories is his evolution from grotesque narratives to arabesque tales, showcasing his imaginative prowess. Metzengerstein marked his initial foray into the arabesque, followed by 4 grotesques. In the manuscript found in a bottle, he revisited the blend of natural and supernatural elements, a technique he mastered. This story, with its vivid depiction of an ominous ship and suspenseful narrative, exemplifies Poe's skill in creating controlled exaggeration and suspense. The story not only foreshadows death but also connects thematically with the descent into the maelstrom, which was rumored to have been submitted for the Visitor Prize along with other tales, though its later publication date in 1841 suggests otherwise. Berenice and Morella stand out not only for their themes of unrequited love and death, but also for exploring deeper issues of spiritual integrity. Berenice features a narrator who agrees to marry his cousin out of pity, highlighting his mental obsessions rather than emotional engagement. The story delves into the narrator's psychological state, leading to the gruesome revelation of Berenice's premature burial and the narrator's morbid fixation on her teeth. This tale, while originally longer and more detailed in its depiction of horror, was later shortened to enhance its impact, reflecting Poe's ongoing refinement of his narrative techniques. Morella represents a higher tier in Edgar Allan Poe's repertoire and serves as a preliminary study for Ligeia, arguably his finest tale. Unlike the morally compromised characters in his other stories, Morella is depicted as a profound scholar. The narrator is captivated by the existential question of whether identity persists after death, a theme Morella deeply shares. After her death, Morella leaves behind a daughter who remains nameless and becomes the object of her father's deep affection. Poe introduces a complex twist with the idea that identity can be too perfectly preserved, leading the father to struggle with the uncanny reincarnation of Morella and their daughter. The story reaches its climax skillfully. At the daughter's baptism, when her father first utters Morella's name, the deceased woman's voice declares, "I am here." The subsequent disappearance of the daughter's body upon her death leaves the reader contemplating the eerie possibility of a spiritual resurrection. This narrative, while impactful, lacks the refined touch Poe developed in his later works. The Visionary, later renamed The Assignation, is pure melodrama, drawing heavily from E.T.A. Hoffmann's Doge und Dogeressa. This story also features one of Poe's most melodious poems, To One in Paradise. Leoneizing is noted for its satirical take on contemporary puffery and the pretentious display of scholarship through numerous classical references, which Poe continuously revised. Today, its appeal is diminished, illustrating the risks writers face when engaging in topical satire. King Pest teeters between the grotesque and the arabesque. With a vivid depiction of a plague, the main scenario involves 2 sailors who encounter a group of bizarre figures in an undertaker's shop. An adaptation of a scene from Disraeli's Vivian Grey. Poe's story is a burlesque aimed at satirizing romantic satires, assuming the reader's familiarity with the original work to appreciate the irony intended. Epimanes, 4 Beasts in One, and Von Jung, Mystification, both engage with contemporary themes, the former satirizing the adulation of a Syrian king by the populace, and the latter critiquing the practice of dueling. These stories, however, rank among Poe's lesser works. Hans Pfaall, initially written as a humorous hoax, parodies romanticized scientific accounts of moon voyages, yet, within its satirical frame, Poe weaves a surprisingly plausible and imaginative narrative that transitions from mere grotesque to the arabesque. His emphasis on scientific intuition and atmospheric theories prelude his more serious scientific explorations, showcasing his commitment to blending factual accuracy with creative storytelling. Edgar Allan Poe's quest for perfection is evident in Psyope, also known as Silence, which he subtitled in the manner of the psychological autobiographists. Initially seeming to parody Bulwer's Monos and Daimonos, Psyope transcends its burlesque beginnings to become a work of profound imaginative prose. Poe's serious intent is revealed through his reuse of phrases from his poem The Valley in S. 1831, later refined as The Valley of Unrest in 1836, underscoring his respect for his own poetic creations. Psyope aligns closely with Shadow, another of Poe's masterpieces from this period, notable for its unified tone and stylistic economy. In Shadow, he draws inspiration from the cholera epidemic and a comet's passage to evoke a sense of unnamed terror, vividly portraying the scene of 7 friends around a deceased comrade. The climax of Shadow is particularly striking, and lo, from among those sable draperies where the song had ceased, there emerged a dark, undefined shadow, a shadow such as the low moon might cast from a man's figure, but it was neither the shadow of man nor of God. Quivering among the draperies, it finally rested in full view on the brass door. It was vague, formless, neither of man, god of Greece, Chaldea, nor any Egyptian deity. The shadow settled on the doorway, becoming stationary. We, the 7, dared not look directly at it but instead gazed into the ebony mirror's depths. Eventually, Ioinos summoned the courage to speak, asking the shadow of its name and dwelling. It answered, "I am Shadow, residing near the catacombs of Ptolemy, by the dim plains of Helusion that border the foul Coronian Canal." At this, terror seized us, for the shadow spoke in the familiar tones of many departed friends. This period also saw Poe produce 3 significant poems. The Colosseum will be discussed later, but To One in Paradise is particularly melodious, with its refrain of "no more, no more, no more" resonating through the final stanza's sheer harmony. "And all my days are trances, and all my nightly dreams are where thy dark eye glances, and where thy footstep gleams, in what ethereal dances, by what eternal streams." The hymn, found in Morella, reflects Poe's desperate circumstances, turning to a devotional tone uncharacteristic of his other work. To Mary, although not quite reaching the heights of the other poems, contains remarkable lines and was later dedicated to Mrs. Osgood. During these years in Baltimore, Poe not only refined his poetic voice, but also mastered the art of fiction, crafting stories that explored the extremes of the human soul. His critical writings during this time laid the groundwork for a literary magazine career, leading him naturally back to Richmond, where such opportunities awaited. In the stifling Richmond summer, Edgar Allan Poe returned to familiar surroundings, his commitment to the Southern literary messenger still uncertain. On August 18, 1835, Thomas White confided to Lucian Minor, "Mr. Poe is here also. He tarries 1 month, and will aid me all that lies in his power." Despite this, White initially withheld the title of editor from Poe, indicating through his correspondence a desire to maintain personal control over the publication. Poe's emotional state during this period was fraught. Richmond's streets, echoing with both sweet and painful memories of his youth, intensified his loneliness. Crucially, he lacked the feminine empathy that had always been a cornerstone of his emotional well-being. His thoughts often returned to Baltimore, a place where such support was readily available. His grandmother, Mrs. David Poe, had recently passed away on July 7, 1835, at the age of 79, leaving Poe and his family to contemplate their future without her. The death of Mrs. Poe also meant the end of her annual pension of $240, deepening Poe's financial and emotional anxieties. Amid these challenges, Poe maintained a steady correspondence with his aunt, Mrs. Clem, providing her with whatever financial support he could muster. A pivotal moment came with a letter from Mrs. Clem, in which she relayed Nielsen Poe's offer to support and educate Virginia, who was just 13 at the time. Discussions about Virginia's future and her relationship with Edgar, who was also her second cousin, were ongoing within the extended Poe family, while it is often believed that Mrs. Clem orchestrated the marriage between Edgar and Virginia to keep the family unit intact. A previously unpublished letter from Poe to Mrs. Clem, dated August 29, 1835, reveals the depth of his feelings. In this letter, Poe expressed not only fraternal love, but also the passionate devotion of a suitor. This document has since become a crucial piece of evidence in understanding Poe's complex personal life.
August 29th. My dearest Auntie, I am blinded with tears while writing this letter. I have no wish to live another hour. Amid sorrow and the deepest anxiety your letter reached me, and you well know how little I am able to bear up under the pressure of grief. My bitterest enemy would pity me, could he now read my heart. My only hold on life is cruelly torn away. I have no desire to live and will not. But let my duty be done. I love Virginia passionately, devotedly. I cannot express in words the fervent devotion I feel towards my dear little cousin, my own darling. But what can I say? Oh, think for me, for I am incapable of thinking. All thoughts are occupied with the supposition that both you and she will prefer to go with Poe. I do sincerely believe that your comforts will for the present be secured. I cannot speak as regards your peace, your happiness. You have both tender hearts, and you will always have the reflection that my agony is more than I can bear, that you have driven me to the grave, for love like mine can never be gotten over. It is useless to disguise the truth that when Virginia goes with N.P., that I shall never behold her again. That is absolutely sure. Pity me, my dear auntie, pity me. I have no one now to fly to. I am among strangers, and my wretchedness is more than I can bear. It is useless to expect advice from me. What can I say? Can I in honor and in truth say, Virginia, do not go. Do not go where you can be comfortable and perhaps happy, and on the other hand, can I calmly resign my life itself? If she had truly loved me, would she not have rejected the offer with scorn? Oh, God have mercy on me. If she goes with N.P., what are you to do, my own auntie? I had procured a sweet little house in a retired situation on Church Hill, newly done up, and with a large garden and, for why convenience, at only $5 per month. I have been dreaming every day and night since of the rapture I should feel in thing, my only friends, all I love on earth with me there, the pride I would take in making you both comfortable and in calling her my wife. But the dream is over. Oh, do you have mercy on me? What have I to live for? Among strangers with not one soul to love me. The situation has this morning been conferred upon another. Branch T. Saunders. But White is engaged to make my salary $60 a month, and we could live in comparative comfort and happiness. Even the $4 a week I am now paying for board would support us all, but I shall have $15 a week, and what need would we have of more? I had thought to send you on a little money every week until you could either hear from Hall or William Poe, and then we could get a little furniture for a start, for White will not be able to advance any. After that all would go well, or I would make a desperate exertion and try to borrow enough for that purpose. There is little danger of the house being taken immediately. I would send you on $5 now, for White paid me the $8 2 days since. But you appear not to have received my last letter, and I am afraid to trust it to the mail, as the letters are continually robbed. I have it for you, and will keep it until I hear from you when I will send it, and more if I get any in the meantime. I wrote you that William Poe had written to me concerning you, and has offered to assist you asking me questions concerning you, which I answered. He will beyond doubt aid you shortly, and with an effectual aid. Trust in God. The tone of your letter wounds me to the soul. Oh, auntie, you loved me once. How can you be so cruel now? You speak of Virginia acquiring accomplishments and entering into society. You speak in so worldly a tone. Are you sure she would be more happy? Do you think anyone could love her more dearly than I? She will have very far better opportunity of entering into society here than with N.P. Everyone here receives me with open arms. Adieu, my dear auntie. I cannot advise you. Ask Virginia. Leave it to her. Let me have, under her own hand, a letter bidding me goodbye forever, and I may die. My heart will break, but I will say no more. E.A.P. Kiss her for me 1,000,000 times. For Virginia. My love, my own sweetest sissy, my darling little wifey, think well before you break the heart of your cousin Eddie. Dear auntie, I open this letter to enclose the $5. I have just received another letter from you announcing the wreck of mine. My heart bleeds for you. Dearest auntie, consider my happiness while you are thinking about your own. I am saving all I can. The only money I have yet spent is 50 CTS for washing. I have now 2.25 left. I will surely send you more. Write immediately. I shall be all anxiety and dread until I hear from you. Try and convince my dear Verdi how devotedly I love her. I wish you would give me the notice the messenger and send it on immediately by mail. God bless and protect you both.
If it weren't so crucial to correct the misunderstandings about Poe's feelings for Virginia, releasing this letter might seem an intrusion on the privacy owed even to those who have passed. In it, we glimpse Poe's bare soul, his intense emotions, his yearning for empathy, his faltering will, his readiness to sacrifice, and his plea for Mrs. Clem to shape their futures. While Poe's erraticism and even self-contradiction regarding his reception in Richmond could be ascribed to his bouts with alcohol, the clarity with which he discusses his financial dealings and domestic arrangements with White suggests a sober mind, free from the influence of alcohol or drugs. As we close this episode on Edgar Allan Poe, we reflect not only on the trials and tribulations of his personal life, but also on the profound impact he has left on the world of literature. Poe's work transcended the personal sorrows he endured, giving us a window into a mind captivated by the macabre and the mysterious. His stories and poems are not merely tales of horror and suspense, but intricate studies of human psychology and the existential dread that lurks in the shadow of the soul. Thank you for listening. Join us next time on our series of Edgar Allan Poe.